Hello. I don't know how to start this, but I guess I'll dive right in. My name is Matt. I'm 36, and I've been married to Lisa, 34, for 8 years. Lisa and I used to be that couple everyone envied, happy, adventurous, and deeply in love. At least that's what I thought. Things started feeling off about 6 months ago. Lisa became distant, but not in a way that felt like stress or overwork. She seemed too happy. She started dressing differently. Tight dresses, red lipstick, heels she hadn't worn since our honeymoon. She also started going to yoga 3 times a week, a hobby she'd never shown interest in before. At first, I chalked it up to her just wanting to reinvent herself. People do that in their 30s, right? But then little things started adding up. She started taking her phone everywhere. I mean everywhere. Shower, laundry room, even out to grab the mail. She laughed at texts and would angle the screen away if I walked by. One time, I asked who it was, and she just brushed it off with, "Oh, just Mandy from work." Then there were the business trips. Lisa worked as a project manager for a construction firm, and these trips started popping up every month. 3 or 4 days at a time, always to the same city, Boston. The first time, I didn't think twice. The second and third, I started to wonder why she never came back with stories about work. When I asked, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Do you really want to hear about dry meetings and boring PowerPoints?" What really triggered my suspicions was our sex life or lack thereof. Lisa used to be so passionate, but now it was like kissing a mannequin. When I tried to initiate, she'd pull away with excuses about being tired or not feeling sexy. One night, after another cold rejection, I asked her directly, "Is there something wrong with us?" Lisa sighed dramatically, her usual move when she didn't want to have a serious conversation. "Matt, not everything is about you. I've just been busy. Okay?" I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in her tone, flippant, like I didn't matter, stuck in my chest like a thorn. A few weeks later, I found a receipt on the kitchen counter. It was for a hotel in Boston, a luxury hotel, one I knew her company wouldn't cover. My stomach sank. When I asked her about it, she didn't even flinch. "Oh, that? Mandy and I split the room cost." Her card wasn't working. She said it so casually, like it wasn't worth questioning. But something didn't sit right with me. I didn't push her that night. I decided to keep watching, waiting, because deep down I already knew. That's when I started preparing for the storm I knew was coming. Couldn't let it go. Every instinct in me screamed that something was wrong. I didn't want to be the guy who snooped, but Lisa's behavior was giving me no choice. One night, she was asleep in bed after a yoga class that had mysteriously ended at 11 p.m. I slipped out to the living room with her laptop. Lisa wasn't tech-savvy, and I knew she used the same password for almost everything, our anniversary date. The first thing I opened was her email. It was mostly work stuff and spam, but there was one email that caught my eye. It was from Infinity Suites, the same hotel on that suspicious receipt. The subject line read, "Thank you for your stay, Mrs. Carter." Mrs. Carter. That wasn't her last name. It wasn't mine either. My heart pounded as I opened the email. It was a simple booking confirmation for a suite booked for 2 nights. The billing details listed Lisa's name, but she checked in with Mr. Carter. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind racing. Was this her alias? Was it some guy? Was he married? I needed more. I opened her Facebook and Instagram. Lisa was careful, no suspicious messages, no tags. But when I clicked her photo albums, I noticed a hidden album she'd marked private. Inside were photos I didn't recognize. There she was, smiling in a dimly lit restaurant. In the background, a man sat across from her. His face wasn't visible, but the way his hand rested on hers told me all I needed to know. Then there was a picture of her in lingerie. Not just any lingerie, but a black lace set I'd never seen her wear. She was sitting on a hotel bed, her face half hidden, the caption reading, "For you, baby." I felt like I was going to be sick. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, my heart pounding, my chest tight. My world was unraveling. All the signs I'd ignored, the excuses I'd accepted, they all came crashing down at once. I knew I needed to confront her, but I couldn't do it yet. I needed more than photos and receipts. I needed undeniable proof. That's when I did something I never thought I'd do. I installed a GPS tracker on her car. I hated myself for it, but I told myself it was the only way to get the truth. 2 days later, I got the notification. Lisa wasn't at yoga. She wasn't at work. She was at a downtown hotel. It wasn't just any hotel, though. It was one of those high-end boutique spots, the kind of place where people went to indulge in something they didn't want the rest of the world to know about. I drove there, my mind a blur of rage and disbelief. I parked a block away and waited, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely think. And then I saw her. She walked out of the hotel with a man. He was tall, older than me, with graying hair and a smug, self-assured air. Lisa was laughing, her arm looped through his. She looked happy. Happier than she'd been with me in months. I sat frozen as they got into a black Mercedes and drove off. Part of me wanted to follow them, but I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. When I got home that night, Lisa was already there, sitting on the couch like nothing had happened. She smiled at me and said, "How was your day?" I stared at her, wondering how she could lie to my face so easily. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "How was yoga?" She didn't even blink. "It was great. Mandy says hi." That was the moment I knew. Lisa didn't just cheat on me. She thought I was stupid enough to never find out. I didn't confront her that night. I needed a plan. I wanted her to have no way to wiggle out of it. No excuses, no lies I couldn't dismantle. Over the next week, I played the role of the clueless husband. I asked about her work. I pretended to believe her yoga stories. But behind the scenes, I was collecting evidence. I started digging into the man she was with. A little time with Google and some social media sleuthing led me to him. Thomas Carter, 52, a wealthy real estate developer. Married, 2 kids in college. I even found pictures of him on Facebook with his wife, smiling at some gala, like he wasn't a scumbag sneaking around with my wife. I also found his work address, and an idea started forming in my mind, a way to hit both of them where it hurt. But first, I needed to confront Lisa. That Friday night, she told me she had another yoga class. I kissed her on the cheek and watched her drive off. Then I grabbed my phone, opened the GPS app, and waited. Sure enough, her car ended up at the same hotel. I gave her an hour, then drove over. My heart was racing, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I got to the hotel, I walked straight up to the concierge. "Hi, I'm looking for my wife, Lisa," I said, keeping my voice calm. "She's in a room with Thomas Carter." The concierge hesitated, but the look on my face must have told him I wasn't in the mood for games. He finally pointed me toward the elevator. I found their room on the 3rd floor. I didn't knock. I didn't want to give them the chance to cover their tracks. I just used the hotel master keycard I'd convinced the concierge to give me. The door swung open to reveal exactly what I'd expected. Lisa in bed with Thomas, both of them stark naked. Lisa screamed, yanking the sheets up to cover herself. Thomas scrambled to his feet, shouting, "Who the hell are you?" I ignored him and looked straight at Lisa. "Yoga, huh?" I said, my voice calm but venomous. Lisa's face turned pale. "Matt, I can explain." "Don't." I cut her off, holding up my hand. "I don't want to hear your excuses." Thomas, clearly trying to assert himself, stepped forward. "Listen, buddy." I turned to him and snapped, "Shut up. You're not my problem yet." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Matt, I'm sorry. Please, let's go home and talk about this." I laughed bitterly. "Talk? Sure, let's talk. Let's talk about how you've been screwing this guy while I've been at home, trusting you." She stammered. "It wasn't supposed to mean anything. It just happened." "It just happened?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You accidentally booked hotels and planned meetups? You accidentally lied to my face for months." Thomas tried to interject again, and I shot him a glare. "If you value your reputation, you'll shut your mouth and sit down." Lisa started crying harder, but I didn't care. "I'm done," I said. "You can stay here with your little fling." I'll be at home packing your things. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. Her muffled sobs followed me down the hallway, but I didn't feel any pity. I felt rage. Cold, calculated rage. Driving home that night, my mind was a whirlwind of anger and adrenaline. The image of Lisa and Thomas in that bed burned in my memory, but instead of wallowing in despair, I let the fury guide me. She thought she could betray me and get away with it. She was wrong. When I got home, I didn't touch her things yet. I wanted the next step to hit harder, and for that I needed time. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started working. First, I collected every piece of evidence I had. Photos, hotel receipts, GPS logs, and the emails I'd found. I backed everything up to a secure cloud storage and made multiple copies on USB drives. I wasn't going to let her twist the narrative. Next, I focused on Thomas. A quick online search pulled up his company's website, complete with a glossy Meet the Team section. There he was, smiling like a snake in a suit. His contact information was listed, but what really caught my attention was a press release about an upcoming charity gala hosted by his company. Perfect. The next day, I visited a lawyer, one of the best in town. I told him everything and handed over my evidence. He smiled grimly and said, "We're going to destroy her in court." But I wasn't just thinking about divorce. I wanted revenge. That night, Lisa came home late, looking disheveled. Her makeup was smudged, and she reeked of guilt. She tried to approach me, her face a mess of tears and desperation. "Matt, please, can we talk? I know what I did was wrong, but we can fix this." I cut her off, my voice colder than ice. "There's nothing to fix, Lisa. You didn't just betray me. You spit on everything we built together. I saw you with him. I know everything." Her tears came harder. "It was a mistake, Matt. It didn't mean anything. I was just lonely." "Lonely?" I laughed bitterly. "You weren't lonely. You were selfish." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "You've already made your choice. Now, I'm making mine." Her face crumbled, but I didn't care. I went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and ignored her sobs coming from the living room. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I contacted a private investigator to dig deeper into Thomas. I wanted to know everything: his finances, his family, his secrets. And Lisa? She was a wreck. She begged me to forgive her, but I stayed cold and distant. She didn't know what was coming, and I wasn't about to give her any warning. The final piece of the plan fell into place when I received an email from the investigator. The information he'd gathered on Thomas was gold. Not only was he cheating with Lisa, but he had a history of shady business dealings, stuff that could ruin him if it came to light. I smiled as I read the report. Lisa and Thomas had no idea what was coming for them. The plan was set. All I needed was the right timing to put it into action. Lisa had no idea I was already 2 steps ahead, and Thomas, well, he probably thought he was untouchable. That arrogance was going to be their downfall. First, I reached out to Thomas's wife, Olivia. She was the kind of woman who radiated class and dignity, someone who deserved better than the slimy husband she had. I emailed her anonymously, attaching screenshots of the evidence I'd gathered, photos of Thomas and Lisa together, copies of their hotel bookings, and even an audio recording I'd made of Lisa's confession during one of her many tearful apologies. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth." The next part of my plan was aimed at Thomas's business. Through my investigator, I learned he was hosting a major charity gala in 2 weeks. It was supposed to be a high-profile event with investors, politicians, and media attending. If there was ever a moment to strike, this was it. Meanwhile, at home, Lisa kept trying to fix things. She'd stopped going out at night and was constantly hovering around me, begging for one more chance. "Matt, please," she said one night as I sat on the couch, pretending to watch TV. "We've been together for so long. Don't throw it all away over one mistake." I didn't even look at her. "A mistake is leaving the milk out. What you did was a choice." Her face fell, but she didn't argue. Instead, she sat next to me, silent. I could see the wheels turning in her head, probably wondering how much I knew or how she could manipulate her way back in. I let her think she had time. The night of the gala arrived. I showed up uninvited, dressed in a sharp black suit, blending in with the crowd. I'd planned this moment meticulously. Olivia, Thomas's wife, was already there, looking stunning in a silver gown. From her expression, I could tell she was here to make a statement. I watched from a distance as Thomas schmoozed with his guests, laughing and shaking hands like he didn't have a care in the world. Then it happened. Olivia stepped onto the small stage where Thomas was supposed to give his speech. She tapped the microphone, drawing everyone's attention. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady but sharp. "Before we start tonight's festivities, I have something important to share." Thomas froze, his smile faltering. He stepped forward, but Olivia held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "You all know my husband as a respected businessman and philanthropist," she continued, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "But I think it's time you see the full picture." She turned to the screen behind her. A video began to play, a compilation of the photos, receipts, and audio recordings I'd sent her. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the evidence unfolded. There was Thomas, laughing with Lisa at the hotel. There was Lisa in her lingerie. There was her voice, clear as day, admitting to the affair. Thomas's face turned red as whispers erupted around the room. "This is a private matter," he shouted, but no one was listening. Olivia stepped down from the stage, walked past him without a word, and disappeared into the crowd. Outside the gala, I watched as Thomas stumbled out, his phone pressed to his ear. I knew he was calling Lisa. She was at home, sulking after I'd refused to even eat dinner with her. I saw her pick up the phone, her face lighting up briefly before darkening. "What do you mean it's out?" she hissed. I leaned against the wall, listening to her frantic voice, knowing full well her world was about to come crashing down. The chaos began immediately. Thomas was publicly humiliated, and his pristine reputation was shattered. Articles started circulating the next day, highlighting the scandal that had unraveled at the charity gala. Social media was ablaze with speculation and outrage. Investors were pulling out, and his company's stock began to plummet. Lisa, of course, had no idea how deeply this was all connected to me. She came storming into the living room the next morning, clutching her phone, her face pale. "Matt, something's wrong," she stammered. "Thomas's wife. She found out. It's everywhere." I set my coffee mug down calmly. "Found out what, Lisa?" She froze, realizing she'd just admitted everything. Again. I mean, about his business stuff," she stammered, trying to backtrack. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Don't lie to me. You're not very good at it." Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no words. I stood, towering over her as I spoke. "You brought this on yourself, Lisa. You thought you could betray me and walk away unscathed. Guess what? Actions have consequences." Her face crumbled. "Matt, please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed coldly. "You're not sorry you cheated. You're sorry you got caught." Before she could respond, I walked past her, grabbing my coat. "Pack your things, Lisa. You're leaving today." She ran after me, tears streaming down her face. "Matt, don't do this. We can fix it. I'll do whatever it takes." I turned back to her, my voice deadly calm. "You already did enough. I don't want to fix this. I want you out of my life." That same day, I filed for divorce. I made sure to include every piece of evidence I'd gathered, ensuring the judge would see Lisa for who she really was. She begged and pleaded, but I stayed resolute. She even tried to threaten me, claiming she'd take half of everything. I simply handed her the legal documents my lawyer had prepared. "You signed a prenup, Lisa. You get nothing but your clothes and your lies." Her face fell as she read the paperwork, realizing she had no leverage. "You can't do this," she whispered. "Watch me," I said, my voice ice cold. Meanwhile, Thomas was spiraling. Olivia had kicked him out of their mansion and filed for divorce, armed with every piece of evidence I'd given her. She also contacted his company's board of directors, demanding his removal. It didn't take long for the board to act. Within a week, Thomas was publicly ousted from his position. His name was now synonymous with scandal, and his professional life was in shambles. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to contact Lisa, but she wasn't answering his calls. She was too busy dealing with her own mess. By the end of the week, Lisa was gone. I packed her belongings into boxes and left them on the porch. She came by once to pick them up, her face red and puffy from crying. As she loaded the boxes into her car, she looked at me one last time. "I loved you, Matt," she said, her voice breaking. I shook my head.
No, Lisa.
"You loved yourself. And now you can live with yourself alone." She drove away, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. With Lisa out of the house, I thought I'd feel relief. And I did for about a day. But then the anger came back, stronger than ever. She had destroyed everything we'd built, and while I'd taken steps to dismantle her life, I wasn't done yet. I had one final card to play. It started with a phone call to Olivia, Thomas's soon-to-be ex-wife. We hadn't spoken since the gala, but when she picked up, there was a sharpness in her tone. "I hope you're calling with good news," she said dryly. "I am," I replied. "How would you feel about exposing one last piece of their little affair?" Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. The next day, Olivia and I met at a cafe downtown. She looked immaculate as always, a stark contrast to how I'd been feeling. As we went over the details of my plan, she listened intently, nodding in agreement. "You're right," she said, her eyes narrowing. "This needs to end with a bang." We finalized everything that afternoon. The following week, Olivia hosted an exclusive dinner party at her mansion. She invited her closest friends, some key figures from Thomas's old business circles, and even a few reporters she knew personally. It was the kind of event that would draw attention, exactly what we needed. Lisa and Thomas, of course, were not invited. But that didn't matter. Before the dinner started, Olivia sent out a mass email to everyone on her guest list, and a few extra recipients. The email included a video attachment, a highlight reel of Thomas and Lisa's affair. It wasn't just the photos or the hotel receipts. It included candid shots of them kissing in public, laughing over dinner, and sneaking into a hotel elevator together. At the end of the video, there was a simple message. To everyone who thought they knew Thomas Carter, here's the man behind the mask. Sincerely, Olivia. The fallout was immediate. Guests at the party received the email on their phones, and whispers spread through the room like wildfire. Reporters at the event were already tweeting about it before the dinner had even begun. By the end of the night, Thomas and Lisa's names were trending for all the wrong reasons. Lisa called me the next morning, her voice frantic. "What did you do, Matt?" I smirked, though she couldn't see it. "What I should have done a long time ago. I showed everyone who you really are." "You ruined me," she screamed. "No, Lisa," I said calmly. "You ruined yourself." I hung up, blocking her number for good. Thomas's life was in tatters. His career was gone, his marriage destroyed, and his reputation obliterated. Lisa, as far as I knew, was struggling to find anyone who would take her side. She had alienated her friends, her family, and even her colleagues. As for me, I was free. In the weeks following the chaos, I focused on reclaiming my life. It wasn't easy. Even with Lisa gone and her betrayal exposed, the wounds she'd left behind weren't quick to heal. I'd catch myself replaying her lies in my mind, wondering how I'd missed the signs for so long. But I refused to let her shadow linger over me. The first step was selling the house. It was too full of memories, good and bad, for me to stay. I wanted a fresh start somewhere new, so I contacted a real estate agent and began the process. Meanwhile, I started going out more. I reconnected with old friends, something I'd let slip during my marriage. They were shocked when I told them everything, but they stood by me, reminding me that I wasn't alone. One night, over beers with my best friend Eric, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, this could be the best thing that's ever happened to you." I gave him a skeptical look. "How do you figure that?" He shrugged. "You're free now, man. No more walking on eggshells. No more lies. You can rebuild your life the way you want it." I mulled over his words. As much as it hurt to admit he was right. As for Lisa, she disappeared from my radar. The last I heard, she'd moved to another state to start over. She'd burned too many bridges here to stay. Thomas wasn't faring much better. Olivia's divorce proceedings were brutal, and from what I gathered, she was taking him for everything he had. She even managed to secure the house they'd shared, leaving him to downsize to a modest apartment. Good riddance. One day, as I was packing up the house, I came across a photo album tucked away in a drawer. It was full of pictures from our early days together. Lisa and me smiling at the beach, celebrating birthdays, laughing at stupid inside jokes. I stared at the photos for a long time, a lump forming in my throat. I'd loved her once, deeply, but the woman in those photos was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I closed the album and set it aside, deciding to leave it behind when I moved. It belonged to another life, one I was ready to leave behind. A few months later, I moved into a new apartment on the other side of town. It was smaller, quieter, and exactly what I needed. I threw myself into work, picked up new hobbies, and even started dating again. There was a woman named Jenna I met at a mutual friend's party. She was kind, funny, and refreshingly honest. We started off slow, but over time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. One evening, Jenna and I were sitting on the balcony of my new place, watching the sunset. She turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about her? Your ex?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. Not really. She's part of my past, and that's where she belongs. Jenna smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. Well, I'm glad she's gone. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found you. I wrapped an arm around her, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time since the storm of Lisa's betrayal, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Months passed, and life continued to move forward. I was settling into my new routine. Work, time with friends, dating Jenna, and I started to feel like the weight of my past was finally lifting. Then one evening, I received an unexpected call from an unknown number. It was Lisa. "Matt, it's me," she said, her voice shaky. "I need to talk." I felt a brief flicker of anger, but I kept my voice calm. "What do you want, Lisa?" "I messed up," she began. I know I hurt you, but please, I'm asking for a second chance. I've changed." I could barely hide the laugh that bubbled up. "You think I'd give you another chance? After everything?" "No. I'm done, Lisa." Her silence spoke volumes. She had no more cards to play. She begged one last time, but I hung up, my resolve stronger than ever. I didn't need her. A few weeks later, I ran into Thomas at a coffee shop. He looked older, defeated, with none of his former bravado. He glanced up, locking eyes with me for a split second before looking away. Couldn't help but smirk. "You're a mess, Thomas," I said. "I hope it was worth it." His shoulders slumped, but he didn't respond. It was the closure I needed. Lisa's attempt to rekindle things didn't just fail, it backfired spectacularly. By now, the people in our small community had caught wind of what had happened. Between her affair with Thomas and the public fallout at the gala, Lisa had become a pariah. But for me, it wasn't enough to let her fade into obscurity. I wanted to move forward, yes, but I needed to take one final step to truly let go. That step came in the form of a letter. I sat down at my desk one evening and wrote a long, detailed account of everything she had done. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment that shattered the trust between us. I addressed it to her and sealed it in an envelope. The next day, I dropped it off at her new apartment. I didn't expect a response, and I didn't get one. But knowing that I had spoken my piece, without shouting or chaos, gave me the closure I needed. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The rage I had carried for so long had finally subsided, leaving behind a strange emptiness. But it wasn't a bad emptiness. It was space for something new. I thought about Lisa's betrayal, not with the sharp sting it once carried, but with a sense of distance. I realized that her infidelity wasn't just about me. It was about her insecurities, her selfishness, her inability to communicate or value what we had built. She had destroyed us, but she hadn't destroyed me. I started journaling in the evenings, writing down not just the pain, but the lessons I had learned. I wrote about red flags I ignored, boundaries I didn't enforce, and the importance of self-respect. One night, I wrote a simple entry that stuck with me. Never let someone dim your light just to keep theirs burning. With the past firmly behind me, I started focusing on building a future I could be proud of. I invested more time in myself, hitting the gym, picking up old hobbies like hiking and photography, and even starting an online course in graphic design, something I'd always been curious about. Jenna became a bright spot in my life. Our relationship was easy, free of the drama and manipulation that had defined my marriage to Lisa. She made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could truly be myself. One afternoon, while hiking a nearby trail, Jenna turned to me with a smile and said, "You know, I think you're finally happy again." I thought about it for a moment before nodding. "I think you're right." One day, months after everything had settled, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. It was from Lisa. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what she could possibly say now. When I finally did, the message was surprisingly short. "Matt, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you for not stooping to my level when everything fell apart. You could have ruined me in ways I can't even imagine, but you didn't. I hope one day you find the happiness I couldn't give you.
Lisa."
I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure of how to feel. The anger and hurt I once carried were gone, replaced by a strange sense of pity. Lisa wasn't my responsibility anymore, and her words, however sincere, felt like a final goodbye. I didn't respond. Instead, I closed the email, leaned back in my chair, and let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It was over. For real this time. Looking back, I realized Lisa's betrayal, as devastating as it had been, taught me lessons I might never have learned otherwise. First, I learned the importance of setting boundaries and valuing myself. For years, I'd been so focused on keeping the peace and avoiding conflict that I ignored the warning signs. I let her dismiss my feelings, manipulate situations, and take advantage of my trust. Never again. Second, I learned that love isn't enough without respect. Lisa might have claimed to love me, but her actions showed otherwise. True love is built on trust, communication, and mutual effort. All things she had thrown away. Finally, I learned to let go. Holding on to anger and bitterness wouldn't change the past, but it could poison my future. Forgiving her, not for her sake, but for mine, was the most freeing thing I ever did. A year after Lisa's betrayal, I found myself standing on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset with Jenna by my side. Life felt lighter, freer, and full of possibilities. As we talked about future plans, weekend trips, career goals, and maybe even adopting a dog, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. Lisa's betrayal hadn't defined me. It had been a painful chapter, but it wasn't the whole story. I had grown stronger, wiser, and more grounded in who I was and what I wanted out of life. Before the sun dipped below the horizon, Jenna turned to me and said, "You seem at peace, Matt, like everything finally makes sense." I smiled, feeling the truth in her words. It does. And for the first time, I'm excited to see what's next. As the sky turned from gold to deep purple, I held Jenna's hand, grateful for the lessons, the pain, and the second chance I'd been given. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to build. Bye-bye.